Gasparini, and welcome to this segment of Penn Voice. I'm joined today by Armando Sanchez, who is the Executive Director of Heart of San Mateo County. Armando, welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
So for the few viewers that may not know what Heart is, please explain to us about your organization and what your role is.
Okay, Heart is a nonprofit organization that was created in 2003 following the dot-com boom of the early 2000s when we were having another severe housing crisis. The mission of Heart is to create affordable housing by any means possible, but we tend to specialize in financing affordable housing development projects. The kind you see that are anywhere from 40 to 150 units of affordable housing being developed by our partners like Bridge Housing, Mid-Penn Housing, Palo Alto Housing, different organizations like that. We provide the early financing to help them get the project started. And the reason we are an important cog in that development process is because in the early stages, a project can go sideways or fail in many ways. The community may oppose it, the soils might not be adequate, there might be contamination. So nobody wants to invest in housing in the early stages. And Heart right now specializes in bridging that gap or providing other types of gap financing to lower costs so that the projects can go forward. One other program we have is a first-time homebuyer program, and that is more earmarked for what's been defined these days as the missing middle,
right.
Working families in the higher incomes, but that still cannot afford to purchase a home in San Mateo County. So we have a program to help people like that with a 15% down payment loan. So they only have to come up with 5% of the down payment. I think what we're finding is in that program is that people can afford a mortgage, but they can't save up the $150,000 to $200,000 necessary to buy a home.
Right.
And that's where Heart steps in to help them get the home. And amazingly, it's a success story because a lot of our borrowers pay off our loan, repay Heart within about 3 years. So it's just kind of opening doors for people who don't have a down payment.
Right. And I think the importance of home ownership is the stability of any community, right? So once you have sort of your stake in the ground and own your home, we tend to find that that worker stays in your community, stays at that job, and it's a wonderful thing for communities to have that stability and know that they've got people that are owning their own homes and investing in their community.
It is tremendous stability, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I was looking at our most recent loans, and we had like 2 teachers, someone who works for city government, a 911 dispatcher, a police officer, a couple of nurses. These are the people who we need to help in our community to stay as well.
Right.
So it is
for the continuity of the delivery of those essential services.
It is.
I'm going to go back to the first part of what you had talked about Heart does and finding the financing for affordable housing and larger developments, because that's something that I think people don't necessarily think about. I think when they think about you know, the 100-unit apartment complex that's going into your neighborhood, you talked about sometimes that makes the community not want that, and there could be some negative around. But the hard reality is the financing part of that development. And so there could even be the will and the want to build affordable housing, but then there are lots of hurdles for that developer to find the financing. You're not only finding the financing, in some cases you might support that financing. Is that correct?
Well, yes. I mean, technically what we do is we raise millions of dollars in order to invest in these projects.
Right.
Typically, the early stages of a project needs anywhere between $500,000 to $2 million in order to get to the point where they get approval from a city to start construction.
Right.
And then to develop their architectural drawings to start construction. So you need that kind of money. It's a big chunk. And so what we do is we raise the money either from public entities such as cities or the state when they have grant programs, and then we compete for those to bring to our county, or from the private sector. Some corporations sometimes make grants to us or loans to us from banks. A lot of the money we get, honestly, is in the form of loans. We like to get donations, grant contributions, but with such diverse needs in our communities,
right.
from health, transportation, housing, everything, it is a very competitive environment. So what we are tending to do at Heart now more to raise money is to borrow significant amounts of money that we can then lend short term to get these projects started.
Right.
So our role is really different, and most people don't see us out in the front.
Right.
When a project
because
gets
it's the
built,
financing part, right?
It is a financing. Think about it as a bank almost, a nonprofit bank that
who specializes in knowing what the community needs are. And again, you mentioned some of your community partners like Mid-Peninsula Housing,
Right.
et cetera. And that's who you'd be working with on these projects. So you talked about the importance of putting teachers and 911 dispatchers and nurses into housing. What are the two things that you think are really important that HEART is providing for the end user, the either renter or the homeowner?
Well, look, let's take the example of teacher housing.
Right.
Many districts are having teachers retire or leave because they simply cannot afford to live here, or they're tired of as traffic has gotten worse, they're tired of the very long commutes from the East Bay or other far South County. And so districts are finding that they need to find a way to house their teachers, not teachers who have been here tenured and have been here for a long time, but newer teachers who are entering the field. So they have decided that what they need to do is to create teacher housing. Right now, we're working with the Pacifica School District to try to help them develop a 45 to 70 unit teacher housing project. It is very complicated. Not only is it expensive, but they are in the field of education. They are not in the field of
housing development, right?
Exactly. And in that case, they have a perfect, beautiful project that they can develop. And you look at the finances and everything makes sense, but they are extremely nervous or very nervous and cautious about moving forward because a 45-unit building is going to cost you $26 million, and the district, rightfully so, thinks, how are we going to get into this situation? And fortunately, there is a way to do it, and we're helping them through the technical things that need to be done to get that project. Later on this month, we're going to be meeting with a number of superintendents and cities talking about a joint housing development. They don't have a site or anything, but they want to talk about how they can partner as well. And so you see the need of public entities needing to start providing housing for their employees, or we're not going to be able to recruit the talent we need to serve our communities.
And we can see that across the board with community hospitals and and a lot of our larger nonprofits, even city and county government as well.
Yes.
So you talked a little bit about the challenges you face. One is the community challenges being there could be neighborhoods that don't want the housing project or don't understand the benefit of it. But what are some of the challenges that you face?
Well, for us specifically right now, it is raising money.
Okay.
I've talked to a number of corporations about making either significant donations to our organization to get these projects going or lending us money. And, the reason I'm going to them is that in the history of HEART, since it was founded in 2003, it has made $19 million in total loans. 9 million of those loans occurred in the last 2 years. So we have the demand for this money is
exponentially increasing.
It grew exponentially, both because of the cost and because of the need. And, one of the unfortunate factors that we face is that housing is such an issue that corporations are finally starting to come into the picture. Unfortunately, what is happening from our perspective is they tend to go with regional organizations that work throughout the Bay Area. And there's a good rationale for that because these organizations are able to leverage their money more than we can. And, if you give them 10 million, they could turn it, go to investors they have worked with traditionally and convert it into $40–50 million. But honestly, they don't know at the local level what is needed and how to work with our local organizations and our partners. Like I said, there's some funds out there that have started and they have all this money, and we've yet to see the results of what they are doing in our community. Whereas right now, HEART, as I told you, we've made $9 million in loans over the last 2 years. Right now, at this minute, we have requests for another $8 million from a number of projects, and we don't have quite that much money, so we're scrambling, our staff and our board, trying to figure out how we can bring in another $5–6 million to supplement what we have to make these loans. And I know there's other developers with projects in the pipeline that are going to come to us. So, I always say you need to work locally to be effective. These regional larger organizations are not going to put in the amount of technical assistance and free time with organizations like school districts, because it's not an easy loan. It's to do the Pacifica project. We've been working on it for 2 years,
Right.
and we're barely at the stage where they're going to get bids on the project in about a month or so.
Right.
So it shows you the level of work you have to do on the ground here.
So I really appreciate what you're saying about our private companies. We focus on some of the larger corporations in San Mateo County. And when they want to do a new campus development or expand on their campus, cities can then typically tag on housing impact fees or community benefit to try and say, then, if you're going to create more jobs, how are you then going to impact housing and contribute it to affordable housing? But it's the organizations and the larger companies that perhaps are still existing and don't have expansion. And I think what you're telling me is, how do we encourage those large employers to also be in the job or the housing creation world by contributing to HEART, so that in turn you can be building and helping to finance affordable housing, and we talk about workforce housing, not just affordable housing, that in turn helps their employees stay in place and helps them gain long-term employment from their employees.
That is a problem. You're absolutely right that most of the major corporations don't do something until they're expanding their campus.
Right.
And in order to get what they need from the city, they have to give back to the community at that point. And I think there are more corporations that realize they need to come to the table earlier and provide that money. But I kind of like what I was saying about school districts' focus being on housing. These corporations, their focus is on whatever business it is that they have, and they don't know how to finance affordable housing, or who's out there. So they tend to bring in consultants who advise them.
But they don't need to.
And they don't need to. If they just talk to our local city representatives, our local nonprofits, they will get a good picture of what is needed here without having to bring in people from the outside who have these more regional or national approaches to solving solutions.
And I think the cities would then point our local companies to HEART as well, because you're part of the conversation at every table there is with regard to housing within our county.
Exactly.
So before we wrap up, so in addition to money, which we talked about is kind of the key part about being able to then turn around and helping some of our nonprofit housing developers to get the financing to build the housing, because that's an important piece. What are some of the other things that you're trying to do with regard to community outreach and information?
I think one of the most important things, besides money, that what is needed is to be truly innovative. And I think a lot of organizations and a lot of people throw the term innovative housing out a lot. But in a lot of cases, when they say innovative housing, their idea is, let's build housing on public lands, let's build housing on school districts, let's build housing on churches who have giant parking lots and don't necessarily need those parking lots. To me, that is not truly innovation. That is the obvious thing to be doing. The real innovation comes in how do you get those projects to work, and how do you make sure that when a project gets built, say in a church parking lot, it benefits both the church and their constituents and the community immediately around them that they serve. That is the real key to innovation, and that's some of the things that we're trying to do. And we're trying to get the message out both to the public and elected officials that what we're about is to ensuring that the resources stay in the community, that they come from the community, they stay there, and they benefit the people that are immediately living there, and it doesn't go to salaries.
Right. And I think the other part of innovation that you talk about is accessory dwelling units. It doesn't have to be 40 to 100 units at a time. We can attack this lack of housing by some of our larger single-family lots, building accessory dwelling units now that the state we've all locally adopted the state regulations in building.
Just real quick, one of the things we have is right now we released a request for proposals to hire architects to design anywhere between 4 and 8 model units with complete construction drawings, and then we're going to go to cities, and if we need to pay for the building department to review them and tell us what changes need to be made so they can sort of approve a hypothetical one, and then we're going to make them available to the public for free, so that when somebody uses one of our units, they can go there and say, this has been pre-reviewed, and they can, go through the process a lot faster.
Right.
And, the Air Quality Board helped us do that, and so we're making them green to save money with the tenants.
Well, Armando, thank you so much for all of the not only innovative solutions that HEART's working on, but some of the challenges that you face with regard to funding, and yet the need is so great. So thank you so much for talking us through that, and hope that we come back and sort of do a follow-up with regard to now that we hopefully have increased the conversation about barriers and financing, and we get through that, how do we actually then take it a step further and get things built in San Mateo County? But thank you so much for all the work that your organization is doing.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see all of you next time on Penn Voice.